It's crazy to see how things have changed in the 25 plus years that you've been in the business. And this movie coming back around and the way it did, it's just also kind of emblematic of it when you talk about it being a cult fan beloved classic and it being revived. This
honestly, for years I've been trying to like get the movie back, so to speak. Because I knew it would be an easy sell. It came out in 1999, so people are already nostalgic for the 90s. It came out in a year like with The Matrix in it, Fight Club, so it was like a good year for movies and stuff. And so I, heading into 2025, when we realized, oh my God, we are gonna finally take Dogma back out, I knew like if we went on tour, it would be so easy to sell out the tour because it just reminds you of a better time. Like you could literally party like it's 1999, which is when we made the flick. Going out with it this time around has been easy. No death threats. There was very little in the way of protest when I was pulling into the movie theater in Dallas, because I took the movie on a 20-city tour around the country before we took it to Cannes, went back to Cannes for the second time with Dogma. We did it in 1999. We went back again for a section called the Cannes Classics, which is nuts. So while I was on tour, most of the theaters were AMC theaters. So most of them were at malls. So I was getting like mall rats flashbacks as well. So I was pulled up at the light and about to turn in, and there's a kid who's like 18, 19. He's holding like a white poster board, and it has a smaller version of our current Dogma poster inside, and it says AMC blasphemes or whatever. So when you see somebody, protesting, or in this town striking, as we were a couple of years ago, you lay on the horn. So I laid on the horn, show support, and the kid holding the sign was so excited. He looked around for the support, and he looked at me, like, because here I am driving, empty seat, and then he's just right there. So I'm laying, looking over. He looks over, and he lays eyes on me, and instantly his face drops, and he shuns me. Like, he turns his face and shuns me religiously. That's as bad as it got. Last time, death threats, a brick put through my kid's window when she was just born and stuff. This time, that. So it's been lovely, man. Going out every night and watching some of my favorite people I've ever met at their absolute youngest. Like, oh, they're all baby faces in the movie. Like Matt Damon looks like Matt Damon's daughter in the movie. That's how long ago it was. And it's got like a good legacy to it, man. Like it's become the umbrella film for me. Umbrella film is the movie that no matter what you do, even if you make shit that people don't like and like, that sucks, they won't crucify you, pun intended, because you made a movie that they like. And for the longest time it was Chasing Amy, but now it's Dogma. We're like, yeah, he made Dogma, and they tend to like back off or whatever. Legacy is important. Once you're around for decades and stuff, if they got a movie you once made that they like, you hold on to it like a fucking life preserver, because it gets harder and harder to make movies that they like. And also the business is so different and fractured than what it was when like the movie came out the first time. You could release an entire movie and the world will never know it necessarily.
Right. So
it's a different vibe altogether, and it helps that people still seem to like the movie. And I was curious, standing there every night, I'm gonna have to force to watch it. Was I gonna be like cringing because it's a 90s movie, like tail end of the 90s, but 90s nonetheless. And it holds up incredibly well. Like, I'm not gonna say it was ahead of its time, but shy of nobody's whipping out their iPhone. It could play as current, except for, everyone looks really young.
So how do I know you're an angel?
Chris Rock is babyface in there too.
And you got to remember, this is Rock when Rock is like about to become the Rock that he has been ever since then. When we were making Dogma, he had just broken with Roll with the New, and so he was becoming respected. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't just like, oh, he's one of the funny guys on SNL. It's like he's doing Carlin level material.
Yeah.
So having both of those dudes on set in Dogma, because I was a huge Carlin fan and stuff, and I was a big Chris Rock fan, and both those cats are in the movie. Having two faces that could be on a comedy Mount Rushmore was an embarrassment of riches, as they say. And watching them relate, like between shots, just off camera in the chairs,
right,
bullshit and talking craft, was like, for a comedy nerd, everything. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I was busy trying to make a movie at the same time, so I had to focus on that and, you know, the puppeteer Jason Mewes, and I was meeting my wife, the lady who'd become my wife and stuff while doing all this. But I still always had time to like sit back and like, I wonder what they're talking about. And felt good about being able to bring those two dudes together on set. George invited me and Rock, because, you know, he knew we were big, not just Carlin fans, but comedy nerds. He invited us to go see him do his thing at Caesar's Palace. It was me and my wife, Jen. I don't even know if she was my wife at that point. She wasn't. She was just a girl I was sleeping with. And then Rock was there with his then wife, Malak. And so we're sitting at a table that's like essentially ringside, right? So it's like me to the camera. I could have wadded up a Kleenex, hurled it at George and shattered his hip. That's how close we were. So we're sitting there watching the show and like, you know, and just fanboying out. Now, George, if you know his catalog, he has one bit he did later in his life called People I Can Do Without. Mm-hmm. So in that bit, one of the people on the list was guys over the age of 12 who wear their baseball caps backwards. Ooh. So like every time I heard that, I was like, I feel seen. So we're sitting there and he starts doing that bit. And in my head, I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna be in the room for it. He's on stage, mid-performance, doesn't even look my way. And he goes, another person I could do without? Kevin, you're exempt from this. Guys over the age of 12 who wear their baseball caps backwards. And so, you know, Rock looks at me and he goes, he knows your name. Yeah. Oh, it was nuts. So yeah, man, working with those two cats would have been worth the trip alone. But they gave me some of their best work. Like, you know, Rock has been acting for years and is wonderful. But you go back and look at that performance, as I have every night for the last month, and then with a fresh eyes audience at Cannes, I thought it was gonna be like a lot of old people like me. It was all youngsters. Like you know, before I ever screened them, like how many people have seen Dogma? How many people have never seen it in a theater? Who here has never seen Dogma before tonight? And the last number is always the smallest. There's like maybe 10 or less people. At Cannes, it was reversed. The biggest number was like none of them had ever seen it and stuff, which was nuts because when I showed up, when they introduced me, I got a standing ovation. It's going to sound like a humble brag, but I'm going to do it. They gave me a standing ovation when I got to the stage before I did anything. Then I gave a speech, and then we showed the movie. And then after the movie, I got another standing ovation for the run of the credits, which was like 7 minutes. So it was like absolutely magical. But every night I sit there and watch Rock destroy, like absolutely kill. Everyone in the cast is top notch. And I can't take credit. You know, you don't direct Alan Rickman. This is what I remember about Alan Rickman when Alan Rickman would act. Like generally when you're a director, you sit behind a monitor, you just look at shit, and then you act, cut, and you go over and you give your notes. Like, say it like this, and maybe do this, blah, blah. So I'd watch Alan do his take, be like, cut, and then I'd walk over and be like, fucking thank you, and just go back to my chair, because what more could you ask for?
No notes. It sounds like it just makes it all worthwhile, because you've been working, like you said, for years to bring this movie back, and then for it to come.
That mentality sells. So I was like, this will be an easy. I live mostly hand to mouth. Like I'm not rich, and I didn't. A lot of people are like, hey man, Clerks must have made you rich. Not at all. Gave me a career, which is awesome.
Right.
But I live hand to mouth. So I live on the road a lot, and I live in comedy clubs more than anything else. So I live a life of, hey, St. Louis, I'm on my way. Like I'm constantly trying to put asses in seats to the point where I can't believe people still follow me on social media, because like, how else am I gonna get people there?
That's like a comedian, no?
Like a comedian, son. Some say I am one, but
yeah, right.
Very much like a comedian. I'm hustling, always trying to put asses in seats. That Dogma tour,
yeah,
like we put out one and it just sold itself. So you're happy for moments like that where it's like, oh my God, I don't have to like browbeat people and beg them to come watch me, an old man, try to be funny. And that's the thing, like for most of your career, if you make it like as far as I've made, if you last as long as I've lasted, like 31 years in, it becomes like relevancy. It's a question of relevancy. Like, does anyone give a shit anymore? Like you've been saying the same shit for like 30 years or in the same vicinity. Like every once in a while you have a new thought or whatever the fuck, or you almost die or you go crazy. So you have new stories, chapters to add. But generally speaking, they pretty much got the shape of you at this point. So it's a game of like, am I relevant enough to get this done? Am I relevant enough to put 300 asses in seats at a comedy club? You know, if I push every day right up till showtime, yeah, I can get across the finish line and stuff. Am I relevant enough to walk into a place and be like, oh, I want to make a movie? And they're like, well, get in line, you know what I'm saying? And plus privilege, I've been doing it for fucking years. So it's like, get behind another line, for heaven's sakes. Why should we think about doing you? But good news is I've built up a nice audience over the years so that, you know, if I step up to the plate, I could be like, they'll probably come again and stuff. So that helps me get shit made, but it gets harder and harder and whatnot. So you welcome something like Dogma, where it's like, look at all these famous people, you know, I could stand behind that. It was crazy. They showed me 2 posters, you know, for this re-release, which was nuts because I thought I'd seen every Dogma poster I would ever see in my lifetime. Suddenly, the folks at Bond Marketing, who are excellent, fucking provide 2 new posters. And one shows like the entire cast in this kind of Last Supper position. And the other is really the Buddy Christ image. And it's got tiny images of the cast all around it. In 1999, we couldn't put the Buddy Christ on a poster. It was a version of Christ where he's pointing, thumbs up, and he's winking. For people who don't necessarily know Dogma, it's just become a meme and a GIF over the decades and stuff that shows up in a lot of things. But for us, you know, it was the thing that we put into the movie. And in 1999, if we'd put that on the poster, no pun intended, we would have gotten crucified. So even with getting people aware of the movie this time around, it's not as fraught with peril as it was back in the day. But will anybody show up? That remains to be seen. If they show up, they showed up on the tour, but that's me with the movie, right?
Right.
So they're getting 2 shows, like a movie and then like a 2-hour stand-up show, which we call Q&A.
But, you know, considering the reception and the fact that this is getting eyes on a film that has a lot to say beyond it just being funny and great. Like it must
funny and great. Pick a lane, one of them, and they're both wrong. The internet's going like, bullshit. Be honest with him. He's gonna die one day. It is a good movie, but in terms of Kevin Smith movies,
yeah. Where does it rank for you? Is it
well? That's different. My scale's different because I grade them on personal experience and not just the making of the movie, but what inspired it and shit like that.
Yeah.
So never like just on like, was it a good enough film? Like that's always going to be in the eye of the beholder and stuff. But this one, I know a lot of people like hold in higher regard than most of the other stuff I've done. This is me at my most inventive, like me going, it showed promise of like, this guy could go anywhere in his career. But the guy who made the movie, like, picked one lane. He saw like Jason Mewes' performance, fell in love with it. It was like, let's just do 26 Chainsaw and Bob movies for the rest of our lives. No regrets whatsoever. It's way up there for me. It's definitely in the top 5, especially because not the movie itself, but the journey to get there includes a life of Catholicism, raised in the church, 12 years an altar boy, 8 years in Catholic school, a defender of the faith, really believed in it. You know, you inherit your faith if you're raised religious by your parents and you never think to question it. But it's just like, of course, it all makes sense and stuff. So I love that shit. It appeals to a kid who loves comic books. I was a big Marvel DC kid, so like the Bible is just that without the masks. All good and evil stories, morality tales and stuff. So naturally, like it appealed to me in a big bad way and fed a lifetime of imagination. And, you know, I was, yes, the kind of altar boy that would sit there and giggle every time the priest was like, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And so that helps as well. You're always kind of looking at the mass from the outside. There's this thing, like I realized the hustle early on. When I was a kid, we'd be sitting in the audience in the pews, right? When you were just a member of the parish, before I was an altar boy. And there's a moment in the consecration, you know, when the priest is taking the wafer and turning it into the body of Jesus. So it's called transubstantiation. During the transubstantiation, when the priest raises it, he says, do this and take this, all of you who need to do this in memory of me, and he raises it. I don't give a fuck where you are, and generally, any church, bells will ring. You'll start hearing ting, 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 ting. And as a kid, I was like, that's Jesus. Like, you know, fucking, it's like going to the Haunted Mansion, and they're like, ring a bell and shit, the ghost. Then when I go through my altar boy training, the priest is just like, all right, so the point of the Mass, you know, where I'm raising up the Eucharist, he's going, you're kneeling right here. As you can see, there's this bell over here. You just pick it up, kind of ring it to your side. You know, keep it subtle. Don't let anybody see it. And right then and there, you're like, oh. Jesus isn't here. It's a fucking trick bell. So that perspective fed a lifetime of, as much as I loved my spirituality and my faith, the organization I was always suspect of. And that'll eventually lead you to Dogma. So I held on to that for a lifetime until one day I was like, oh, I'm going to write a movie about that kind of shit. So because of that, I'll look at Dogma and be like, oh, that's one of my favorites. Long tail.
Do you think the new Pope would like this one?
I gotta, right? I gotta think he would. He's American. He's from Chicago.
He would.
Good sense of humor, I remember we started our tour on Easter Sunday, 4/20. And the next day, our screening was in San Diego. So first Los Angeles, then I drove down to San Diego. So Easter Monday, they're like, the Pope has died.
Yeah.
It's one of the first questions I got when I was in San Diego. I was like, did you kill the Pope in this movie coming back? I said, no, man, I heard it was J.D. Vance. I immediately threw somebody else under the bus. I got to imagine the new Pope, though, would be like, come on. Like, here's the thing. For years since this movie came out, before it came out, death threats, 400,000 pieces of hate mail. One of the death threats, this isn't me being anti-Semitic, but I'll never forget this fucking death threat. Can I do it for you? I'll perform it.
Nice.
And I got to close my eyes to pull it. You Jews better take that money you stole from us and start investing in flak jackets. We're coming in there with shotguns.
Wow.
Signed, your brothers in Christ. So it was like hectic.
Jeez.
Back in the day, man. So now, ever since then, honestly, once people started seeing the movie, it's easy to call it a polemic and say it does this and this until people see it.
Yeah.
Then when they see it, what's embarrassing about the movie is how reverent it is. The kid who wrote that movie and directed it believed in everything that's in that movie. He wasn't making fun of it. It wasn't like Monty Python's Life of Brian going like, let's take this shit apart. It was a guy going like, no, all of this is true. So much so that when we were shooting the movie, like Carlin's going, what's going on in this scene? And I was like, well, because of the plenary indulgence loophole, blah, blah, blah. He goes, what's the plenary indulgence thing? I was like, you're an old Catholic, you know this? And he goes, no. So I started explaining it to him and shit, and going through our catechism. And he's looking at me like with this face, like almost like the face of an adult when a child over-explains Star Wars to him. And then finally he goes, you really believe in all this shit, don't you? And I was like, yeah. I mean, you were raised Catholic, you don't? And he goes, no, I'm smarter than that. So, it was, I think the movie's aged to the point where I know for a fact, over the years, I've heard from priests, rabbis, religious leaders of all denominations who are like, this movie's great for reaching the youth culture. I don't know why people went after the flick. So I gotta hope that Catholic Church has never said anything about my movie. Then, now, because Catholic Church is smart enough to know that, like, if you don't want people to pay attention to something, don't say it.
Yeah.
So I got to imagine, 99, how old's our new Pope? 70-something?
Yeah.
So this would have happened when he was in his, like, late 40s, early 50s. Just because they didn't talk about it don't mean that they didn't watch it in the Vatican. I think that movie wears its heart on its sleeve. I've watched it every night for the last month, more closely than I've seen it since I edited the movie 26 fucking years ago. And what I see is, like, if you know your Bible in the Old Testament, they talk about King David, like, stripping down to his skivvies and dancing the fool in front of the Ark of the Covenant on behalf of the Lord and whatnot. That's what Dogma plays like to me. It plays like a kid really trying to celebrate his faith after having grown up in a church where every Sunday everyone seemed to be mourning it instead and whatnot. So I think you'd see it for what it is. It's a love letter to spirituality.
As someone that kept the faith long enough to see this through, there's something to be congratulated for on that too, from the religious side of things.
Like, look, I can't validate my own existence. I went crazy like 2.5 years ago, wound up in a nut house, man. Sierra Tucson. And they really, I lost my marbles, they helped me find them. Kids, if you ever find yourself slipping from the grip of reality or in need of mental health assistance, do not hesitate to ask. I don't care what your race, creed, color is, gender, how old you are. I asked, and that's the only reason we're having this conversation today. So when I was there, man, they diagnosed me and they told me I was a codependent people pleaser who can't validate his own existence. So that made a lot of sense because I was like, well, that's where the whole career came from, right? And it was like, well, and then I've spoken to many comics since then. They're like, welcome to the club, my son, because that's how you get where you want to go.
Right.
There's not enough There's never enough. Like, even when you have loving parents, I have one of them still around. My dad's dead. But I had absolutely loving parents. I didn't even have like, when I was in the booby hatch, I wasn't like, my parents fucked me up. They kept going at my parents. I was like, my parents were great, man. So like, I had loving parents. I got a loving wife. I got a kid who thinks I'm great and stuff. They say nice things. I can't hear them. All I could hear is just like, wow, they got to say nice things. Takes absolute strangers in the darkness. Some faces I'll see, some I'll never see, man, to tell me like, you're doing good, Kev. And that's the only way I can hear it. So back in the day, I had my faith, right? And then after I made this movie, how I like to say it is in the movie, there's a discussion about beliefs versus ideas. So, you know, I don't have those same beliefs anymore. Now I've got some different ideas and stuff. And changing an idea is easier, as we say in the movie, than changing a belief. Changing a belief's much trickier. It's mired in rigidity and whatnot. Whereas changing an idea, ideas are more fluid and stuff. So I haven't had my faith in, oh shit, maybe 2 years, 3 years after this movie came out was when I started going like, I guess I'm going to put this down now. And I absolutely miss it from time to time because it's incredibly useful. I don't think I would have wound up in the booby hatch if I'd still been a man of faith, because when you're a person of faith, you don't, yes, there are trials, but shit, Lot had trials, you know what I'm saying? Like Job had trials. We all have trials. That's to be expected with the human condition. When you have faith, you can get through those trials simply by being like, JC, take the wheel. You know what I'm saying? You have somebody to lean on at all times. And when I didn't have that, it's not like it happened right away, but it's a slippery slope. Like about 20 years after, you know, my faith wasn't there anymore, there's nobody to hand the wheel to. That being said, no regrets that I did, man. I honestly feel like everybody should get a mental health break, a required 1 month mental health break somewhere across your lifespan. Not like, you know, like universal basic income would be more helpful, but that's helpful temporary, short term. Taking a month off of the rat race, taking a month off of life to have somebody remind you of what's important, and to put things in perspective, it would be helpful. I was in there with a kid. He was young. He was like 17. And I felt bad in the beginning. So I was there for a month. He was there for a month. And I was like, 17? He's got his whole life ahead of him. At the end of my trip, I was like, I wish I'd gone crazy when I was 17 and had my whole life ahead of me. Now having the technology this kid's just been handed and stuff, oh, my 20s would have been so much easier and stuff. And I had pretty easy 20s. So it is, it's crazy, man, like that the movie has come back. I've always believed in the movie because the audience likes the movie and stuff. And it does have a pretty famous cast that I get to hide behind and be like, remember when people liked me? Like in the trailer, the good folks at Bond who did the new poster, they'd cut this amazing trailer, which again, I never thought I'd see another Dogma trailer. I'd seen it. And here we are like 26 years later, like here's the new Dogma trailer. It was absolutely wonderful. It made me go, like I know the movie and I was like, fuck, I'd watch that movie. But as there's one thing it said like from writer director Kevin Smith, and I was like, I don't do that. Like I never take a film by credit. I don't do that. Written directed by Kevin Smith or market Kevin Smith in the trailer. And like yes, but like your name now means like a thing. You can't like stop being coy. And so I was like, all right. And so I said, I will let you do it, but one condition. So they changed it and added the one thing. So it says written and directed by Kevin Smith in parentheses when he was good. So it's nice to be able to stand behind something that people still consider good. And the good news is this, like I just went to Cannes. They invited this movie to go back for the 25th anniversary, all thanks to Alessandra Williams, who saved my movie, man. She got it. She raised money, bought it away, saved my movie about angels from the devil himself, Harvey Weinstein, who personally owned it and stuff. Right. So she submitted it to Cannes, and she was like, I'm going to submit it to Cannes. I said, we already went in 1999. They're not going to let us come back twice. She submitted it to the Cannes Classic section I didn't even know existed, which technically we weren't even supposed to go back under the aegis of that because that's movies that are 50 years or older. But Cannes was like, well, it's been here. And we got to go back, man. So when I went back, I was like, oh, this will be fun. It wasn't any sort of like, I'm going back as a filmmaker. It was more like victory lap for this shit we did years ago. Right. Like, and so Jennifer, my wife, came with me. Well, last time we were walking up the red carpet in Cannes, she was pregnant with our daughter, Harley. So we got to, hair up our ass to be like, let's bring the kid this time. She could walk up the carpet with us, but outside Jen and shit like that. So we turned it into like this little family vacation. I thought that would be the best of it and stuff. But when I got there, I was like rolling around all these old places that like I never expected to ever be in my life. When I made Clerks, I wasn't thinking like we can go to Cannes. I wasn't even thinking we go to Sundance. I was just thinking like maybe I can show people this movie and they'll know I can make a movie and they'll give me money next time so I don't have to put it on credit cards and shit. That was it. Right. So the thought of going to Cannes was never there. All of a sudden one day I was there with this first movie and then I got to go back and it shaped the young version of me. So there I am walking around the Croisette and I'm like, look at this shit, man. I used to be here. Like this used to be my world. And then I was like, why do you assume that you're never going to make like a Cannes-worthy movie again? Like, let's have that discussion with ourselves. And sometimes it's just easier to believe the worst about yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm a creature of the internet. My career began roughly around the same time, the advent of the internet. I got a few good years before the internet really started happening, but I was on from 1995 forward and stuff. So I was there for the beginning. I met the first troll, and now I've met so many since. And the internet, you know, is a useful tool, but it's also the place where every day someone will let me know that I suck at my job. There's a never-ending stream of people who be like, you suck at your job. This fucking sucks. That movie sucked. You suck. You used to be good. You sucked. And then some people are like, you're never good and shit like that. And I've been hearing that for 31 years. But I go to work every day. I still have the job. So I don't know if can I really suck that badly? And then I remember like, well, nobody gave me this job. I gave it to myself, right? I'm an indie filmmaker. I came from the indie film movement of the early 90s. I didn't wait for somebody to come out and be like, hey, why don't you do a fucking thing? That was never going to come. No help was ever coming. So I realized that like, I'll always be able to do stuff as long as I don't get canceled or killed. Even if they don't want me to do something on the other side of the hill or the people with the money or the industry, whatever that is these days and shit, it's so fucking fractured. Feels like I could still, and I know for a fact, I'm still muddling along, getting my movies done, whether people engage with them or not. Life is long. If they don't see them when they happen, they'll see them down the road. So this one, as I'm walking down the Croisette, I'm going like, you know, maybe you got one more Cannes-worthy movie in you. Like maybe you got a classy movie. You got to remember, I wasn't trying the other times. Like that just happened and shit. So I was like, maybe if you put your all into it and shit like that. And so, you know, when we were introducing the movie, the head of the festival was there, Terry Fermo, and you like walk up the steps and they bring you into the theater and shit. And so I told him, I was like, hey man, like same thing I was just telling you. I was like, but I said, now like I got bit by the bug again. Like I'm feeling the fire. So this is the 78th edition of Cannes. I said, it's my intention to come back to the 80th with the Dogma sequel. And the audience like, and Terry Fermo's on the stage. He goes, if it is good. And I was like, well, yeah, there's that. So it's been a cool little journey with Dogma. I honestly didn't expect this to happen. I've been trying to make it happen, trying to get it back for the 10th anniversary, the 15th anniversary, the 20th anniversary. Could never get it done myself and shit. Alessandra Williams, who's this wonderful woman who literally grew up in my neck of the woods. She's way younger than me, but she grew up, like I went to Henry Hudson, she went to Middletown North. Like I used to go buy my comics 1 block from fucking North. When she was like 10, this movie came out, and I guess she got one of them permissive parents, let her watch the movie.
Right, yeah.
And she like said, she's like, I fell in love with it, didn't understand the whole thing, and that made me watch it over and over again. So she's like, I grew up with this movie and whatnot. And then, you know, she went off and had a career. She acted, she produced, she traveled the world and stuff. She's done a bunch of stuff. And then she saw me on the internet talking about not being able to get Dogma back. Tried to buy it 3 times from Harvey Weinstein, who's been in jail for quite some time. And each time his lawyer said no. Offered $250,000, $500,000, $1 million. Was told no. I heard he was holding out for $5 million. And I was like, if I had $5 million, no offense, I'd make a new movie. Fuck buying an old ass movie.
Didn't he? He called you at one point too.
He did. Let me tell you that story.
He made it sound like he was interested. Right?
Let me tell you that story if you've heard the story before, kids, bear with me. But it is kind of like, what the fuck? So I left the Weinstein Company. I started my career in 1994 with Clerks, was bought by Miramax, which had just the year before, maybe 6 months before, been bought by Disney. So Disney bought Miramax because they wanted to win Oscars. Indie film was a big thing in that moment. And every studio wanted their own indie film division, like New Line had Fine Line, so forth and so on. Disney bought Miramax. Miramax had like the piano prior to that. What else had they done? Sex Lies videotape. You know, they built their reputation as for lack of a better description for today's modern audiences, they were the A24 of their day. The indie film movement was burgeoning. I got in, and I honestly suspect, nobody's ever told me this, but Miramax had been bought by Disney, and there was no internet, but there was still bitching. And there were a bunch of people, I don't know where they bitched, op-eds, or maybe they wrote pieces and stuff about like, well, there goes Miramax because they're owned by a fucking corporate Disney. So all their interesting movies are going to go out the door. And I honestly believe Clerks was purchased mere moments after that transaction happened once Disney owned Miramax. So that Miramax, and when I say Miramax, we're talking about the guy who was Miramax, Harvey Weinstein. Yeah. So that Miramax could be like, hey, you think we sold out? Look at this piece of shit black and white American movie with a foul mouth. It's a Disney movie. Go fuck yourself. So I honestly feel my career began as a statement that business as usual or whatever, I don't give a shit why it happened. It happened. So Miramax started my career, man. I worked at Miramax until they left, and it became the Weinstein Company. I followed the boys to the Weinstein Company. And then in 2008, after Zach and Miri, I left. So I get a phone call years later. And they go, Kevin, hold for Harvey Weinstein. I'm holding. He's Kevin Harvey. I said, how are you? And he goes, good. I just realized I got Dogma, and we're not doing anything with it. And this is music to my ears. I've been waiting for this. I've been pursuing this. Like fucking for the 10th anniversary and the 15th. I would be like, hey. So him calling up and talking about it was like, oh my God, yes. Yeah. I said, look, everyone's always looking for home video, man, because now the home video is like $100, $200 on eBay and shit like that. And he goes, well, I think it's time we put it back out there. He's going, I'm going to make new deals for it. And he's going, don't you think this movie could hold a sequel? He's going, that cast is all still working today. Ben and Matt are as famous as ever. I said, yes. Yes, you're damn right. He goes, at least the streaming series. I was like, yes. He goes, all right, I'm going to call you next week. We're going to get into this. And I was elated. This was a phone call I've been waiting for forever and stuff. So I hung up and I was like, Dogma's coming back in my life. 3 days later, New York Times exposes him for who the fuck he was, which was fucking crazy, shocking, and eye-opening to a lot of us. In those days after the article, we're all calling each other going, did you fucking know? Did you know? To everyone we've known across, a decade plus of being at Miramax and at the Weinstein Company. So I was speaking to John Gordon. So I said to John, I don't know how to say this. I said, I feel dirty, but I said, he called me last week. He goes, what? I said, he called me last week for the first time. I hadn't spoken to that dude since I left Weinstein Company after Zach and Miri. And he called and he talked about Dogma. He wanted to do Dogma as a sequel, as a streaming series. And John goes, Kevin, he had no interest in doing anything with Dogma. He was just calling you to see if you were one of the sources on the New York Times piece. What? If you had not answered the phone, he would have added you to a list of people he suspected had fed information to the press. Yeah. That you answered just said that it was business as usual and you were Kevin and you wanted to make a Dogma thing. And so he just dangled that in front of you and stuff. Now, terms of egregious things that Harvey Weinstein has done, this doesn't even make the fucking list.
Yeah.
But I was trying to get this movie back, even back then. And then years later, like after he went through his legal troubles for the 20th, that's when I made 3 offers, but his lawyer rejected it each time. So there's Alessandra Williams, who sees me on the internet talking about trying to get the movie back and being unsuccessful. And Alessandra goes like, oh, I love that movie. More people should see that. I'm going to help him. And that's literally how we got here. She went and raised a bunch of money, and I guess he was going back into court. He's back in court right now, and he needed some legal scratch. So he got rid of whatever assets that he had left. And some of the assets that he was holding on to was Dogma, Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11, Larry Clark's first movie, Kids, which was Rosario Dawson's first movie, and then a couple karate movies I guess he bought in the wake of Kill Bill or something like that. So it wasn't like those were his prized possessions. He'd had a lot on his mind. I don't think he was ever thinking about those. Right. But in a world where he's like, I got to make more money, I need cash for my defense, he sold them. And he sold them at quite the discount for what I understand. She was able to raise the money if I could get them. She sold off the other pieces, and then she was like, I have Dogma. And I was like, what? And she was like, what would you do with it? And I was like, I would do what we've been doing with my movies lately, man. Like, basically, I just take them to theaters, charge more money. And she's like, all right, we could do that. I was like, we did it with Clerks 3, Jane Silent Bob reboot, works out real well. And then she said, well, what about just going into theaters normally, like re-release? I was like, oh, I don't think the business is interested in that sort of thing. And yet the movie's going to open now on 1,500 screens, man. But that had everything to do with like AMC. They reached out to AMC. I told Alessandra, I was like, hey man, like, because she was talking about what studio should I go to? And I was like, like, take your time. I said, but if you want to go theatrical, why don't you do what Taylor Swift did, man? Reach out to AMC. She just skipped the middleman, went right direct. And reaching out to AMC was absolute bliss. There's a woman who works there, Amanda, who was just the right person in the right place. She was like, I love this movie. I grew up watching this movie. She was just like, I'll do anything I can to help this out. And we were this close to Buddy Christ popcorn buckets.
Oh, wow.
Were it not for the trade war.
Yeah.
They don't make those here in the States, sadly.
Yeah, can't have it all.
No. You know, but if that's what I had to leave behind, if that's the sacrifice I had to leave behind on the altar.
Yeah. Pretty good.
Not bad. Yeah. No complaints.